There are lots of passages and stories in Scripture of how God called men and women to a specific task and purpose for a specific time to further his mission and his kingdom. And so we are going to focus a little bit in the book of Nehemiah, if you want to head there, Nehemiah chapter 1. For those of you who need some context, Nehemiah was a Jew who had been in exile after the destruction of Jerusalem. And the exiles, once they were released, so there was a first wave that came and rebuilt the temple. Nehemiah was coming along in this final wave, but as he was still in exile, he had asked his brother and some other people, hey, what is going on? So he wanted to know what was going on from them. So in verse 3, it says, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble. This is what the brother replied. And disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. Nehemiah says, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Nehemiah was burdened about what his people were carrying. He was burdened with their hurt. City walls back then were essential to a city, not only for protection and safety, but they were a symbol, too, of strength and dignity and peace. And so his heart was broken that his city did not have walls, and that grieved his heart, and he wept and he mourned. So his heart broke for this need, and then what happens in verses 5 through 11 is he prays to God for favor in doing what the next thing that needs to be done to happen. So you can read that on your own, but he wanted change, he wanted hope, and then it says he gets permission to go. He goes back, he wants to go back to Jerusalem, and when he arrives to Jerusalem, the first thing he does is he assesses the landscape of what is going on. Chapter 2, verse 11, it says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there for 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone yet what God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. And it goes on to give detailed descriptions of him going through around the city, seeing the walls, seeing where there was damage, seeing where there was destruction, seeing what the needs were of Jerusalem's walls. And so after he does this clear assessment of the landscape, he goes to the people and he says in verse 17, you see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. And so they began this good work. So if you continue to read, you will see that this group of people come together with a unified goal and vision. People were given specific tasks to execute this mission. People were working next to, you'll see, if you look through the passage, they say so-and-so was next to so-and-so, working on this part of the wall. They were shoulder to shoulder, working together to rebuild the wall. There were times when they received opposition, but because they had a clear vision and were united, they were able to come up against that and overcome the opposition. And then the wall, that at one time felt impossible to complete, was completed in record time because of this unification. And so, I think you can probably see some of the parallels of how this story of Nehemiah connects to our big three and our focuses for our area. But first, I want to camp a little bit on how we get to this big three, right? How do we get to this? And so, first, is we have to let the Lord break our hearts for what breaks his heart. Nehemiah's first step was weeping and mourning and grieving over the destruction and over the pain of his people. So anything that we do when it comes to vision needs to come out of our hearts being broken for what matters to him. 2, we assess the landscape. He went with people to check it out. We need to assess our areas, our ministries, our clubs, assess our communities and the needs of them. We need to see the damage that maybe a pandemic left. We need to see areas that are faulty and crumbly, that maybe need some solid foundation brought to them. So we need to assess that. And then, as Nehemiah did, we need to plead with the Lord for favor in this process and for direction. And then finally, we need to rally the people who are with us to do that. And so, you, in your area, are uniquely positioned with influence. You have authority in the space that God has given you. So you need to rally people to come with you and do that and be a part of that important work. Sound good? We tracking? Okay. So, now, still, maybe some of you are wondering, why? What does this do for me? How does this help me? How is this not just another thing on my checklist of things to do? But I want you to see that this is going to help you. This actually might lighten some of your load. But first, having a big 3 unites us, and it creates alignment. And so when you have vision and purpose, people want to come together and be a part of it. And so when your team is united, it says in Philippians 2:2 that we want to be of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. This will help with your area to know where you're going. And when your committee and leaders can stack hands together, it'll keep you on track, and it'll help keep the main things, and not get distracted by these other little things. Has anyone ever had distractions just float across your desk all day long? Right? When we have clear vision, we're able to keep that front and center. So, having a big 3 will align us and unite us. 2, having a big 3 inspires and motivates yourself and other people. Without a clear sense of direction, people will become frustrated. They will become burnt out. They're going to struggle to see what smaller mundane tasks are adding up to. They're going to struggle to see the value of showing up to a school and feeling awkward. When we have clear focus, we're able to connect all those little things to a big purpose together. And then 3, having a big 3 leads to progress and movement. When we prioritize a few things, we're going to see more things happen. Statistically, I did some research. If you have 2 to 3 goals, focuses that you are working on, whether personally, professionally, as a team, you will likely hit 2 to 3 of those. If you are consistently focusing on like 4 to 10 goals, so say you have not a really narrow focus, you actually will be more likely to only hit 1 or 2 of those. And if you have no goals or 10 goals that you are working towards, you will likely hit 0 of what you're working towards. So by having a big 3, it actually gives you freedom to put something on the shelf and say, you know what? I'm not going to focus here right now because we're focusing on these 3 things. I've actually had conversations with some of you in this room where, you know, you've transitioned a Young Lives coordinator out of your area and trying to figure out what do we do next. And I've said to you, maybe we just need to pause first. I want Young Lives everywhere, but sometimes we need to pause and really assess what we really need to put our focus on. And then, when we we're spinning all of our wheels, doing all of the daily things without a clear focus, we are very unlikely to make progress on one big thing. And so my hope for you is that you will see you're going to create unity on your team with the big three. You are going to inspire and motivate your team more with the big three, get more buy-in, and you're actually going to see progress on the things that you want to focus on. So we are actually going to break into some breakout groups because I want us to see a different mindset around these big three. That these are actually for you and for the advancement of God's kingdom.